Selectmen's meeting for May 31st, 2017. I'd like to thank our friends at WACA-TV for broadcasting this meeting live. For the pleasure of those folks who are at home watching it, we appreciate you taking the time on your busy schedules to watch our meeting. And for those that are here this evening in person, we thank you for being in attendance. This is a special meeting tonight. We usually have 2 meetings a month, but where we had a 5th week, we were able to post another meeting, and this meeting is a special meeting that will be focusing a lot on the Charter Review Committee's 2-year study in revising the charter with their recommendations. And it's been a long task, a tedious task, but a task that was taken in reverence by those on the committee. And it was an honor for me to be part of that committee, and I enjoyed working with all of you. So I just want to thank you all while you're there. Before we begin tonight's meeting, as always, I ask you all to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Now I will ask the Charter Review Committee to open their segment of the meeting as well. Thank you. Okay. Very good. Thank you very much. Though it looks like a light agenda, we do have a lot that's going to be discussed this evening. And I will open it up for citizens' participation, but very briefly. God bless you. Very briefly. So if there's anybody here tonight for citizens' participation, if you would please come up with new information or new requests, we would be happy to hear you.
Mr. Chair?
Good evening.
I'd like to participate in citizen participation, but I would ask that I sit here.
Sure.
If I can
Not a problem.
do so.
Want me to go
Do you
first,
mind?
Steve? No, whatever you
Okay.
want.
So I just wanted to speak. I was expecting actually Kathy Rooney from our Town Forest Committee to be here tonight, but I will speak on her behalf, and it's in reference to the corner spot. And if you've driven around town over the last week or so, you've seen some activities going on at the corner spot. We have, there's been some plantings done, there's a pergola that's been installed, there's some swings that are in the process of being installed as well. So a lot of work, and a lot of it is volunteer driven. So I did want to throw out that there was a group of volunteers over the weekend that planted, and I know there'll be some more opportunities for volunteer experiences coming up. They will be announced on the town website through various mediums, and I would hope my colleagues on the board here would participate if it works out time-wise. But I put it out to the community as well. I think it's going to be a great project. We've had a lot of support, and so I ask people to consider volunteering there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Joel.
Joel Arbeitman, Woodridge Lane. First and foremost, because I live with somebody on the committee, I want to thank all of the members of the Charter Review Committee. The amount of work that went into this is staggering, and people sometimes see the final result, but they don't realize the effort that was put in, and it was beyond remarkable. Maybe better than, more effort than I've seen on any other committee.
Did it affect your relationship?
Excuse me.
We'll get to that later. Topic 2, at the May 25th Planning Board meeting, Campanelli and Thorndike were there discussing some modifications to the site plan that they had, and those changes specifically included major intersection changes where they're going to be doing the work. And I only bring this up because the input that they received as to what changes were to be made, which this board is apparently going to be considering at its next meeting, that's my understanding, it had to do primarily with signalization, the traffic light system. And they received very excellent, very necessary input from the DPW, from the fire department. What they didn't receive was any consideration of the Upper Charles Trail or a complete streets vision or anything related to it. So as far as walkways, pedestrians, bicycle lanes, and so on, I'm very concerned that work is about to be done yet again where these key issues are not having any representation. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because Mr. Geisinger stated at the planning board meeting that he is looking for approval as quickly as possible so that he can proceed with his work. So I hope this gives the board a little time to consider these issues and make whatever determinations they deem appropriate. Last topic. The Upper Charles Trail Committee is hosting a forum tomorrow night at 7 p.m. at the community center. This forum is probably the most important of all of the meetings we've had because the consulting firm we hired, Alta Planning and Design, is going to be presenting many of the various alternatives for the public's consideration. And what we're seeking, and every person in the community, even those under 18 years old, are invited to come and participate and vote to say, I like this path, I don't like that path, and so on. If you don't show up, we can't know what your preference is. This is your chance to be heard. So we really encourage everybody to come out. There's babysitting services that were arranged by our town planner, so people with families can participate in this. Sheila pointed out that you cannot avail yourselves of the babysitting service if you're not attending the forum. You can't go off to the movies. So anyway, we hope everybody shows up. Community Center, 7 p.m. tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Joel, real quick on that, will the information that's presented there then be available on the website so that if for some reason someone has something else tomorrow night, like there's other stuff going on in town, that they could at least look at the information and give feedback that way?
Absolutely, and we also have on the website already comment forms for the public. They can use them repeatedly as many times as they like and at any time that they like.
On your website, not the town website, correct?
Thank you.
I don't know what the status of it is, but what we talked about at our last trail meeting, I hate to call it my website. What we've done is indeed provide a service through the Ashland Bike Club, linking to all of the information that the committee and the consultant has.
But it's not the town website.
But the town, Sheila was tasked, and I don't know whether this has been completed yet, but it is in her queue to do, is to have these types of items listed on the town's website, linking to the Ashland Bike Club's website. We're happy to shift everything over to the town. It just seems like it's more work than
Yeah, I would think it
anybody
should.
seems to want to do. But
I would think
that's
the
where we're
meeting
at.
itself should be on the community calendar,
It is, is it? Yeah.
and
So
it's
Mr.
on the electronic board, so.
So, Mr. Chair, if I could just add, to support what Joel says in terms of the importance of this meeting tomorrow. If anybody has any interest in the Upper Charles Trail, this is a very important meeting to go to. There's been a lot of work done over the past months and years on this, so I'm looking forward to seeing the presentation. And I did want to second that thing about, the Upper Charles Trail is an official town committee and should be fully on the town's website with all the supporting materials. So I hope we can make that happen as soon as possible.
Thank you, Rick.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Okay. Kathy, if you can make it kind of quick, because we have a 7:10 hearing
Yes,
and presentation.
thanks. Sorry I was running
That's
late.
okay. Good evening.
So I just wanted to say thanks everyone so far who has volunteered on the corner spot on the planting. We got about 2/3 done last weekend, and we're having another work day on this Sunday, probably a couple of shifts, one starting at 8 and another one at noon or 1 o'clock.
Did you say this Sunday?
Yes,
So June 3rd, 4th?
4th, not the
June
3rd, because
4th.
I have another job on the 3rd that I'm working on. And I just wanted to...
What time?
8 o'clock and then noon or 1 o'clock. You can show up any time and
Okay.
do work, 'cause there'll be work there. We're especially looking for people who are experienced doing planting or grading, things like that. Bring shovels and trowels. And I just want to once again say thanks to Beth Reynolds for conceiving of this idea and putting it all together, and all the other people in town on the staff and also volunteers who have spent oceans of time making this work. It's going to be awesome when it's done. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Colonna, good evening.
Paul Clona, 19 Columbus Ave. Just wanted to let you all know that we're still here. We're still having all the same problems as before. I have a letter I'll give to you, Carl, from my next-door neighbor who called the police one night to have them come for noise in the middle of the night, and the officer, female officer, told her that's factory noise. That's just the cost of them doing business. That's in the middle of the night. That's what we're afraid what was going to happen, that the reasonable person would be the police officer and not
Well, the law is not in effect yet. The law hasn't been adopted until the Attorney General's office adopts the law.
Okay, that's what I heard. But the other old law still is in effect, so actually by 7 they should be quiet.
But that's not necessarily true, but
It's the bylaw. But anyway, just want to let you know.
that's why we replaced that bylaw, because no one can figure out what it means.
Okay. Well, we still have Conley Bus. I don't know if all that's going on. The construction's still going on. It's been 1 year tomorrow. Next week, they're going to start digging our road again for a gas line for the next 2 weeks. So just wanted to let you know we're still here. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
Hopefully they can do it jointly, so that way they don't have to hot topic it twice.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda, we have a 7:10 hearing and appearance, and it's with North Star Lodge, and I would like to invite Scott Stanny, if you would be so kind to come up and introduce yourself to the board, and tell us a little bit about the North Star Lodge, if you would, please, Scott.
Thank you. Board of Selectmen, distinguished guests, fellow citizens all, thank you and good evening. My name is Scott Stanny. I'm here tonight in my capacity as a Freemason of North Star Lodge. I currently hold the office of Junior Warden for the Lodge, and I'm sitting chairman of the Charity Committee. The town was gracious enough to give me a spot on this agenda so that I could extend the Lodge's formal greetings, and so that I could have the opportunity to talk about who the Freemasons are and how we are trying to become more involved in the local community. The Freemasons are a somewhat formal institution. We are steeped in tradition. The roots of Masonry in the United States stretch back to before there was a United States. In Massachusetts, you may not be aware, sits the oldest Grand Lodge in the Western Hemisphere, and just the third oldest lodge in the world. In fact, in Framingham, Middlesex Lodge, Milford's Montgomery Lodge, and Natick's Meridian Lodge were chartered in 1795, 1797, and 1797 respectively by the then Grand Master Paul Revere. So those lodges make our lodge at North Star seem young by comparison, having only been chartered since 1864. When I first inquired about becoming a Mason through our Grand Lodge here in Massachusetts, I actually had no idea that there was even a lodge here in Ashland, despite having lived here for a few years and even having driven right by the lodge on multiple occasions. North Star nearly shut down in the early 2000s because of a lack of members and therefore financial support. Fortunately, it survived, and thanks to the efforts of its members, it has begun the rebuilding process and is once again ready to re-engage with the community. I personally became a member in 2014. So I want to start by answering the question, what is a Freemason? No, we are not members of the Illuminati. We're not bent on human domination, in spite of what you may read on the internet. No, in reality, we're men, each of us trying to become the best version of ourselves possible. We say that we are all hewn from the same rough stone. The Mason is aware of his imperfections and strives to improve himself. By coming together for this common purpose, we find it easier to make progress toward this endless goal. Masons may hold many different fancy titles inside of our organization, but ultimately, we are all brothers. From the youngest, entered apprentice, to the Grand Master of Masons in Massachusetts, we share this as a common reference. When you become a Mason, you are a Mason for life. And anywhere in the world you may travel, there are Masons, brothers, that will always welcome you as if you were one of their own, because you are one of their own. Masons are there for our brothers and their families, no matter what else might happen. And we are bound to render all lawful aid to our fullest extent when one of us falls. This sense of duty to our brothers is extended beyond the fraternity through our core landmark value of charity. We say that we value faith, hope, and charity, but that the greatest of these is charity. We say, for our faith may be lost in sight, hope ends in fruition, but charity extends beyond the grave through the boundless realms of eternity. It is in this spirit that we endeavor to engage with local charities and organizations that in turn help those around us. Today, we support 4 areas for this community. First, we are community partners with Family Promise Metro West. Family Promise, for those who don't know it, is an amazing organization that helps homeless families. They provide not only shelter, but also job retraining and learning or refining of life-critical skills. They help families get back on a path to sustainability and ultimately back into permanent and affordable housing. We help them financially through volunteering, through in-kind donations, and through the efforts of individual Masons. We also have representation on their community volunteer committee. Second, we support and are coalition members of the Ashland Decisions at Every Turn as a fraternal organization. We are just beginning to explore the ways that we can help with this important mission and hope to grow our involvement over time. Third, we sponsor a small but growing scholarship fund for the Ashland High School seniors. This year we plan to give away 3 $1,000 awards to the finalists that have applied. I must say, I am incredibly impressed by some of the kids. Hopefully, whatever we're doing it right, and I hope my kids someday can be up there with those kids. Excuse me. And finally, we have a chapter of the Masonic Angel Fund here at North Star Lodge. The Angel Fund is a charity that is run by the Masons of Massachusetts and is meant to provide assistance to children with otherwise unmet needs. It donates anonymously through authoritative positions in contact with kids. For example, school administrators, Boy Scout leaders, and so on. In addition to our charitable endeavors, we have been working in other ways to get ourselves out in front of the town so that we can become known to more people. We have been sponsoring a tent at the Ashland Day, and this year, for the first time, we will have the run of the community table at the farmers market on August 12th. We have also held, without much success, open house days at the lodge, which we're going to be analyzing how we go about that and hopefully coming up with some better ways to conduct successful open houses. We're also planning a new slate of community events over the next year or two to help us grow our reputation in Ashland and to help us continue to give back to the community. So let me just wrap up with 2 things. First, a shameless plug for the lodge, and second, a request. First, my shameless plug. North Star Lodge has been able to do a lot of good since we started to rebuild, but we are limited. We need more members of the local community to join our ranks. Freemasonry is open to any man who is of good report, comes well recommended, and who is willing to look into himself and draw out over time the very best version of himself possible. The Masons offer an opportunity to develop leadership skills, improve your confidence in all your interactions with other people. It tries to teach us to become better husbands and fathers, and ultimately, better men. If you, or somebody you know, is finding themselves wanting to do more, be more, they may find the answer in Freemasonry. Second, my request. The town and Board of Selectmen have already been extremely generous with the time granted. We would like to request that the town give due consideration to North Star Lodge if they are ever seeking a sponsor for a community event, or if they would like to have community organizations participating in an event. We want to help and we want to participate. My fellow clockers, we are very enthusiastic about getting ourselves reacquainted with our host town. We hope that this is a start to a renewed, long, and beneficial relationship with Ashland. Thank you to the Board of Selectmen for extending me the honor of standing before you this evening. And if we have time, I would welcome any questions. I will also plan to stay until the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good.
Good? Any
Yeah, no,
questions?
fantastic
Very nice.
presentation, and, you know, certainly very pleased to hear the interest, the desire to get engaged, and, you know, I'll defer to my colleague, Rob Shear, to, his daughter did a film about the lodge.
Really?
So I'll let him
Excellent.
speak to that, but, who should we, if there are community organizations that want to partner, let's say, with the lodge, who should we contact?
You can contact me. I'll leave my contact information here if you don't already have it. As junior warden, I'm one of the senior officers of the lodge, and I also live in town, so it makes it really easy for me to
Fantastic.
stay in
Great.
touch.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I just, you know, again, it's good that you guys are getting out there and making yourself known. I think that's good. Are you familiar with the documentary on the North Star Lodge?
No.
You didn't know anything about it?
I
It was
didn't know
only-
it was there.
It was done less than 2 years ago.
Really?
It's available on Ashland Archives that you can YouTube it.
Interesting.
North Star Lodge about
Do you know
Freemasonry.
did she access the Mass Genealogy website to get information
I'm
about
not
the
sure.
lodge?
She had extensive interviews with all sorts of lodge members, so
Oh, really?
I'm surprised you don't, yeah. So I would
Okay.
check that out, and
Yeah.
also you might find it useful for your own, you know, having the community become more familiar with the lodge. I
That's
think
great.
it's an
Yeah.
That's
interesting
great.
thing. You should.
It was really well done, and you might, if when you're at the farmer's market, you might consider having a laptop there and actually playing it. It's,
Yeah, how long
again, it
was
was well
the-
done.
How long was the documentary?
20 minutes, something
Yeah.
like that. I'm trying to remember.
Where can I access it online?
YouTube. It's YouTube,
YouTube,
under
okay.
Ashland. There's a number of documentaries under Ashland Archives. If you do
Oh.
a search, you'll see that Henry Warren and Freemasonry and John Stone's Public House. Those three, yeah.
Great.
I think they're still there. So.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thank you, Scott.
All right. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Okay. Bless you. Everything all right over there? Just want to make sure I don't want to lose my vice chair over there. 7:20, and we're about 5 minutes behind, so I apologize. I would like to invite Roberta Stillman and Ken Rush to report from the Charter Review Committee all the work and present a slideshow. And I would ask this board that if what I would like to see is have Roberta do the presentation first, and if you have any questions, hold off on any questions unless she stops and has any specific areas where you want to ask questions. She'll probably stop it. Let's do the whole presentation first, and then we'll do
Okay.
questions at the end. Make it a little bit easier and not as long. Thank you. Ms. Stillman, good evening.
Thank you. I thought I'd never get here to do this. It took us a while.
A
but,
long journey.
But we're done, I think, with our part of the work anyway. So thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for arranging a special meeting to have this joint meeting with the two committees. We really appreciate it. And we are very pleased and proud of this report. So I'd like to introduce the committee members who are here. Ken Rush is the vice chair, and he's going to be going through the changes that we're recommending regarding the recall process. Alexis Christopher, right behind him. KG Nariani, right next to him. Betsy Emberly, our secretary, and Steve Greenberg, right there. And Joe Magnani, who is also on our committee. All right,
I'm not going to have to stand up.
Okay. So, is there an easier way to do this? There we go. Okay. So,
Both ways.
part of this is information that all of you have and all of you that you know as elected officials. But I just want to also put it out there for people who are at home watching this so that they have a context within which to manage all of this information that we're going to be presenting tonight. So basically, the charter is the constitution for the town, and it sets out fundamental principles which determine how town government is run. And that list is some of the things that it defines. Everything from the powers of town meeting and whether it's an open town meeting or a representative town meeting, to the powers of the various elected officials, recall, the powers of the town manager, organization of the town departments, the budget process, and how to fill vacancies if someone resigns, and potential loss of office. I'm gonna see if this, that's for this either, okay. There are two different ways in Massachusetts that a town can revise and change its charter. One is called the option 43B, and the other is called the Home Rule Petition. According to section 1.2 of the current charter, Ashland has chosen the Home Rule Petition. So we are now in the middle of this process where we've conducted research, collected input, and submitted our report. After this report is given to the selectmen have 60 days within which to hold a public hearing for anyone in the community who wants to come and make comment. Then the Board of Selectmen can either accept our recommendations based on what we've recommended and any comments that they've heard from the public hearing, or they can reject it all, they can accept parts of it, and then decide what they want to do with it. If they want to proceed, they then vote to place the recommendations, whatever they are, if they're a combination of ours and changed recommendations, on a town meeting warrant for a vote, and a simple majority is required in order to approve the changes in the charter. Then the town clerk sends a certified copy of the town meeting minutes to our legislative delegation, and we ask one or both of them to file it as state legislation. The legislature sends it to committee, looks it over. If they vote to approve it, then it goes to the governor, who reviews it and hopefully signs it. And the charter becomes effective on the date that's inserted in the legislation itself. There's no predetermined date. Okay. The Charter Review Committee obviously had a charge from the existing charter and the selectmen, which was to review the charter and make any recommendations that we thought would be responsive and be appropriate for the current situation in town. As a committee, we also thought it was important for us to have a mission that we all agreed to that would move us forward in the same direction, and also state some of the values that we had as we were doing our work. So that's our mission up there. To provide a town charter for all residents so that they will have a local government that's accountable, responsive, effective, efficient, and transparent, for us to follow a thorough, open, and inclusive process, and to produce a report that clearly explains our proposed changes and any potential policy recommendations. This is just a summary of our work. We did seek extensive input. We did a lot of research individually. We took different members of the committee, took different topics that interested them to research. We consulted with the Collins Center for Public Management at UMass Boston. They have a whole department that specializes in helping towns revise their charters, or in the case of a town like Framingham, change from a town to a city. We held 58 public meetings that were all posted in accordance with open meeting law. We sought extensive community input, and the next slide will go over that. We discussed all of our material and made decisions by either vote or consensus, and then we're producing this report for the selectmen. The community input for residents, we had 3 public forums, an online and paper survey, participation in emails to the committee. We were at the town tent twice. We did a presentation at town meeting. We did an interview on Policy Beast that was broadcast multiple times on WACA. We discussed and debated our recommendations of public meetings, and again, we're here this evening. These are the boards and committees and the staff in town whom we had interviews with. I apologize in advance if there are any inadvertent omissions. We went over and over this list, and hopefully we've included everybody. But as you can see, we extended invitations to all the boards and committees, and these are the boards and committees that either submitted input on paper or came to us for an interview, and all of the staff listed on the right came to us for interviews as well. This is a list of issues that we discussed and researched. It's not an all-inclusive list, and we did not wind up making decisions on every one of these issues. Some of them we decided to just put aside after we looked into them and decided that we weren't going to deal with it. We had no changes. There was nothing in particular we wanted to talk about. But I'm showing you this and the next two slides just because it's important for you to see the very extensive list of things that we dealt with. So this is another set of issues, and this is another one. Okay, before I discuss the amendments, I would just like to say a couple of things on behalf of the committee to sort of put our changes in context. We were well aware of the responsibility we carried on behalf of all residents of the town, present and future, and we performed our duties with all due diligence and care. While we ideally would have liked to have finished more quickly, we soon realized that a review of the charter involved much more than just reviewing 12 pages of text, which is what I naively thought when I started. It's only 12 pages, how long can this take? It took 2 years for us to get to this point where we could make a report. Government is messy, and the process of trying to make recommendations or change it is also messy. Our questions gave rise to more questions and more discussion, which necessitated more research and more debate. We know, and I'm just going to say this up front, that we won't please everyone with every one of our recommendations, and frankly, if we did, something would be wrong. Debate, an authentic, honest, and informed debate is healthy and necessary in a democracy, and we should have that conversation. We believe that the changes we propose make the charter simpler and clearer. We believe that the changes we're proposing enhance mutual accountability, transparency, and inclusivity, and do so with respect. We believe that the changes we're proposing are independent of personalities and individuals and will provide a sustainable structure no matter who's on staff, who's elected, or who's appointed. I can't emphasize that enough. We did so much work, and we were so aware of the fact that we could easily be sucked in to the vortex of dealing with individual people in town, individual problems in town, individual committees or boards in town, and trying to fix the problem at the moment. And what we constantly, moved back to was our role was to make sure that we had a sustainable and effective structure no matter who was sitting in the seat. Because the reality is, no matter what you put in place, if the people sitting in the seat are not behaving honestly and with integrity, you're going to have a problem no matter what structure you have. We tried to get a structure that had accountability, checks and balances, and fairness, and hopefully we have achieved that. So our amendments fell into two categories: readability and clarity amendments, and then substantive amendments. The readability and clarity amendments are much easier to digest. They're basically language, grammar, punctuation, and style. Readability were dense paragraphs we split up into smaller subsections. We added some more definitions. Capitalization in the charter is kept to a minimum in line with the conventions of legislation and law and the existing charter. So you'll see that the names of boards and committees and titles of staff are not capitalized. That's not a mistake. That was totally intentional. And gender-neutral pronouns were used, and words imparting the masculine gender shall include the female gender at all times. These are the community values that we heard from residents over and over and over again, from committees and boards and staff, that they wanted a charter that had simplicity and clarity, as I've said before, mutual accountability, transparency, inclusivity, respect, a sustainable and effective structure, and changes that were independent of the people who were sitting there. When we went through our substantive changes, the ones that will change actual content and procedures and have an effect on the charter in a real substantial way, we found that they fell into sort of 4 categories. So that's how I'm going to present them. I'm not going in order section by section through the charter. We have 4 themed areas, and I'm going to present amendments as they pertain to each one of the themed areas. So the first one is avoiding any perceived or real conflict of interest and achieving a balance of authority. The second one is appointing qualified individuals to key town boards. Third one is enhancing transparency, consistency, and accountability. And the last one is clarifying process or language. A note about the text on the slides: if it's bold text, it means it's new text. If it's not bold, it will be a summary of a change that's really long, and we'd be here till like 4 in the morning if I went through every single word. So we've summarized what the changes are, but the report will be, I assume, up on the website for people to download it and take a look at it if they are so inclined to go word by word. Okay, so the theme for the first set of recommendations is to avoid a perceived or real conflict of interest and to achieve a balance of authority. And the First Amendment deals with full-time employees holding elective office, and this is new language that we're proposing inserting. And it's all in bold, so this is the actual language. We believed that any registered voter in town is obviously eligible to run for elected office, whether or not he or she is a employee of the town. However, we felt to avoid a conflict of interest and to maintain a balance of authority, that no full-time employee of the town reporting to the Board of Selectmen, either directly or indirectly through the town manager, may simultaneously hold the position of selectman. And the corollary would be for the school district, no full-time employee of the school district may simultaneously hold the position of school committee member. It just made sense to us, anyway, to do it that way. And we chose not to get into the granular level of, well, what about a part-time person? What about a temporary person? What about a consultant? We're just dealing with full-time employees. If the residents or the board wants to deal with part-time or temporary people, that is something that's up to the town to decide. The next one is holding multiple offices. We looked at particularly the Board of Selectmen, the School Committee, and the Finance Committee. The Finance Committee, because they are the advisors to town meeting and they make recommendations that have an impact townwide, and we wanted them to remain objective and not be on another committee that could be influenced by a Finance Committee decision. So that seemed pretty basic. The Board of Selectmen and the School Committee, we felt should also, because their jobs are so extensive and affect so many people and have such a broad range, that for purposes of avoiding a perceived or real conflict of interest or purposes of maintaining a balance of authority, that they should also not be allowed to hold any other elected or appointed office, with the following exceptions. They may be appointed as an ex officio non-voting member of any standing or ad hoc committee over which they have appointing authority. If there's a school building or property improvement or construction project that will require the issuance of bonds, we felt it was appropriate to have one member of the selectmen and one member of the school committee. And similarly, if there was a construction or improvement project for a town building or property, we felt it was important to have one member of the Board of Selectmen appointed to a building committee. And finally, a member of the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, or Finance Committee can serve as a full voting member of any subcommittee of their respective board or committee. So it's a subcommittee or standing committee of your own board, not some other committee that you appoint. So here is our rationale for that. We also looked at some other options I just want to put out there. we looked at having people ex officio non-voting on whatever committee they wanted to be on, and we thought that that would get kind of unwieldy and maybe not achieve the the balance of authority and the conflict of interest goal that we were trying to get to. We also looked at having, one of the suggestions made to us by the Collins Center was to have each committee have a Board of Selectmen liaison. And to make that mandatory, I thought would make you all crazy if you had to be on someone had to be on every single solitary committee in town, so we opted not to do that.
Thank you.
There was also a question, and perhaps you want to seek a legal opinion on this, as to whether or not the Ethics Committee, the Ethics Commission mandated that people could not hold additional offices. There seems to be some conflicting information on that. In some places it looks like they do, in some places it looks like they don't. And finally, the Collins Center told us that most charters are silent on this issue and don't deal with it at all, and just whatever happens, happens. But we thought we ought to deal with it, and so these are the recommendations, and here's the rationale. On the pro side, as I said, the Board of Selectmen and School Committee have a town-wide impact over residents and the work of other committees, so it's important to avoid real or perceived conflict of interest. On the con side, you may lose the opportunity for valuable expertise that a member of the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, or Finance Committee could bring to another committee, and it might add to the difficulty of some multiple member bodies, which is what the newly defined term we're inserting in the charter for boards, commissions, committees, and subcommittees, so we don't have to repeat those four things every single time. In filling vacancies, if they're not able to select someone who has already demonstrated a commitment to volunteerism. Okay, before I move to the theme for the second set of amendments, are there any questions I can answer, and hopefully we can hold full discussion or debate until the end, but just if there are any clarifying questions for anything that is unclear.
Can I just, I think, a clarifying question? So, for example, you know, we have the liaison committee, we meet with the school committee about finance. How does that play into this? So I think Yolanda and Joe are on that committee. So is that one of your subcommittees of the committee?
Yeah.
Or is it?
We
that's
looked, I went onto the website, which needs to be updated, because in one place they still have someone else as the town manager.
Still have John Petra's name on it?
Yeah. So we went down, and there were, and it may be some of the committees require a selectman on it by its charge, and I didn't didn't check that. But there were, so for example, Yolanda was listed on 3 committees, and some of them, the terms expired, so I don't know if the committees are still meeting or they're not. Carl was on 2, Joe was on 4, Steve Mitchell was on 4, and Rob Shearer was on 2. So there were a lot of instances where board members were spread around in other places. And the question is, you know, is that mandated, or is it voluntary? Does it have any perceived conflict of interest? Are we losing any balance of authority? And the other question, which we didn't really talk about, but which is obvious, is does it stretch you guys too thin when you have a lot of Board of Selectmen issues to deal with? So those are the considerations that we went through in trying to figure this out. And I have to say, I think that this was one of our more difficult decisions.
So, Roberta, my question was just kind of a clarification, because I wasn't sure how to interpret that liaison committee that you guys are on.
A liaison is a subcommittee of the Board of
That's-
Selectmen.
Okay, that's what I
So
wanted to.
it means
we
that
created it.
we created, so it means we
So
can be
it is
on
our
that
subcommittee.
committee,
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's helpful.
based on this rationale.
Right, okay. Whereas I'm on the Upper Charles Trail Committee, so
Right.
that I would not be able to continue. I would then be I could be, what was it,
Well, didn't the Board of Selectmen create
created that
the
one as
Upper
well.
Charles Trail Committee?
Well, it's a question of whether it's a subcommittee or it's an appointed separate committee.
Okay.
And
So that would be
in
the
the
debate.
numbers I just mentioned, I was also including the override committee, because even though it's not still functioning, it was really important in the last year. And so that had the two
Oh,
of
yeah,
you,
that was
Rob
by-
and Steve, you guys were both
Right.
on that at that time.
That was by design, so how does that fit into your,
Well, that would be sort of it depends who
Yeah, it would be
appoints
a
it. I guess if
subcommittee.
you appoint it, it's a subcommittee,
It was a subcommittee of us.
and you could, certainly sit on that.
thank you.
Okay. So for the second set of amendments, we wanted to ensure that we were appointing qualified individuals to town boards. And we looked at, in particular, the Library of Trustees, the Planning Board, and the Board of Health, as to whether or not there were good reasons to change them from elected to appointed. And for the Planning Board, we felt it was extremely important to the residents of the town that they continue to have public trust in their land use decisions based on documentation presented at hearings. And so we felt that that should definitely stay elected. We couldn't find any good reason to change the Library Board of Trustees, so we didn't. But we did have a long, multi-meeting debate over the Board of Health. And we decided to recommend changing the Board of Health from elected to appointed. And this affects 3 sections. Section 3-1, where the Board of Health is omitted from the list of elected town offices. 3-2, where it's added to the list of multiple member bodies appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And 3-5, where it deletes the section which describes how many members are in the Board of Health, what their terms are, and the like. In making this recommendation, we considered multiple things. We had a document from the Collins Center which outlined different areas, and if it's, your answer is this way, it would lean you towards an elected body. If your answer is this way, it would lean you towards an appointed body. And we went down through the list and sort of looked at all of the things, such as the level of the board's policy-making responsibility. If it was significant, then the board should be elected. If it's minimal, then the board should be appointed. The level of ministerial responsibilities and performance guided almost entirely by statute. If there are few ministerial responsibilities, they should be elected. If there are many, they should be appointed. If the level of training or specific expertise needed for someone to quickly be able to perform effectively is a lot, then they should be appointed. If it's a little, then they could be elected. If the roles and tasks are easily and widely understood by the public and are not complicated, then they could be elected. Otherwise, it would lean towards appointing. If the role is relatively simple for the public to evaluate the performance of non-policy making responsibilities, if it's simple, they would lean towards being elected. If it's more difficult, they would lean towards being appointed. If the board is helpful and needed as a check or balance against another power center in the community, they should be elected. If not so much, then they lean towards appointing them. If it's not critical that the board be able to collaborate with other elected officials, then they can be elected. If it is critical, then they lean towards appointment. And finally, the final thing that we looked at was contested elections. If the election is usually very competitive with a lot of highly qualified candidates, then they lean towards elected. If they're not very competitive and they produce very few or no highly qualified candidates, then it leans towards being appointed. Since 2006, from 2006 to 2016, in Ashland, there were 3 contested Board of Health races. The selectmen, I think, had 8. I think the school committee had 7. The Board of Library Trustees had 0. And the planning board had something in the middle. But the Board of Health had 3. In 81 towns ranging in similar population to Ashland, it's almost evenly split. 40 have an elected Board of Health, 35 have an appointed Board of Health. In one town, Somerset, the Board of Selectmen serve as the Board of Health. I don't think you want to go there. And in Fairhaven, the Board of Health is a blended board with some members elected and some members appointed. We also did talk about that, but I think we kind of didn't talk about it for very long because it's a little messy to implement. So, our rationale for making this decision, which, and I have to say again, just reiterate, was a very difficult decision, and it was one that was not made with any particular individuals in mind or the current conflicts in mind, although it was difficult to ignore them as they dribbled over into the public arena again and again. So our decision was based on what's best for the town, irrespective of current members or conflicts, even though it was difficult to ignore what was going on. And I would just want to reiterate this again, that there's no way to ensure a highly functioning board, either elected or appointed. We have instances in Ashland where appointed boards have gone off the rails, and we have instances where an elected board has, some would think, gone off the rails. So there is no magic bullet. There is no one way to do it right. There is nothing that will guarantee that we will get the result that we want. We also realize that conversion is a major change, and the Collins Center said that the current trend is to move from elected to appointed, but once you do that, the boards rarely ever revert back. And residents expressed a strong need through their input, through multiple different sources, a need for the Board of Health to maintain its independence and not be subject to pressures from its appointing authority. Nevertheless, we are making the suggested recommendation that the Board of Health be changed from an elected board to being appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And it was probably that and the serving multiple offices, those were the two decisions that I would say generated the most discussion and were the most difficult decisions made. Any questions there?
No, but I just want to say this is not the first time it's being recommended after a charter review to make the Board of Health appointed versus elected.
Right, the last time.
The last time they did, it didn't
recommended.
pass at town meeting, but it was presented and proposed at that point too.
Roberta, you didn't mention the Board of Assessors.
We didn't consider the Board of Assessors.
And why is that?
I don't recall why we didn't. I'm not sure why. We just mostly focused on the library trustees, the planning board, and the Board of Health.
Well,
I mean, we didn't go through every single.
well, they're the one appointed committee you didn't deal with.
Yeah.
The reason I
The
asked is,
assessors is elected.
I'm sorry, the one elected committee you didn't review of the ones you
I
listed.
think the Board of Assessors has to be elected. I think according to state law, they have to be.
Because it occurs to me, just thinking in general and applying the Collins Center criteria, that's an obvious candidate to be appointed.
But it can't be according to state law.
Is that the
State law,
reason
I
then?
believe requires, yeah.
The information the Collins Center gave us, they were definitely more elected than appointed. The larger the town,
see.
they were elected.
More elected than appointed what?
To the Board of Assessors.
So then it's
So there
not
are
state
some
law
that
that it needs to be.
It's not, okay, then I'm incorrect on that. So we just didn't, I mean, we looked at the competitiveness of multiple
Sure.
races, but we had an interest in, we just mostly focused on those
All right, I just
three.
wanted to, I don't know if we're discussing things now or we're holding that till later, but
Yeah.
that just struck me that there was no mention of the Board of Assessors. Okay.
So the third set of recommendations would enhance transparency, consistency, and accountability. And the first thing that we dealt with was the town moderator. We're recommending changing the term from 1 year to 3 years, and we're also recommending specifying that the town moderator shall not hold any other office, elected or appointed. For the same reason, we felt the Finance Committee should not either. They have virtually the same relationship to town meeting, and they have a very close relationship in that the town moderator appoints the finance committee, which is advisory to town meeting. The other thing we dealt with regard to the town moderator was that when appointing members to the finance committee, we're recommending that the town moderator shall follow a new public appointment process that we're recommending all multiple member boards follow, and it's outlined in section 8.1, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So our considerations for that included that of towns with population plus or minus 2,000 of Ashland's population, the a majority, 58%, have a 3-year term. The other considerations were that the learning curve for the job is significant, and to have someone do it for 1 year and then maybe have someone else have to do it for another year would create a lot of chaos and disruption in how town meeting is run. We also felt that running for election every year can be a distraction from actually performing the job, and no other elected office in town is for 1 year. I think I covered that. The public appointment process, again, which we'll discuss, we got a lot of comments that nobody knows how the town moderator picks people for the finance committee. And people felt that that process should be more transparent and should be more public. And section 8.1 is recommending consistency among all appointing authorities, that they all follow the same procedure. Okay, and now I'm going to introduce Ken Rush, who's going to cough his way through explaining the recall of elected officers.
Good timing.
Just click the left hand.
This one here? Oh, well, thank you. We know the changes to the recall process were going to be kind of involved, so we created this table to show you the difference between what we have now and what we're proposing. And we also have a column just to give you an idea of a sample timeline. I picked October 2nd as just, you know, a day to pick. The difference between calendar days and business days, and the fact that in Ashland there's only 4 business days a week since we're closed on Friday, or town hall is closed on Friday. So the process, the current process and the proposed process are very similar, with mostly the changes being made in durations or thresholds required for different events to occur. The first thing you have is someone who is dissatisfied with an elected official circulates a petition, you know, petitioning for the recall of this elected official, and presents it to the town clerk. Under the existing charter, that petition needs to have 500 registered voters also signing the petition. And we're proposing reducing that number to 150. Again, this was following the public input on, the public input indicated that a lot of the comments on the recall process was that it was very onerous in order to get a recall. So we're making it a little easier to get a petition into the town clerk. The duration, once that's occurred, the duration for the town clerk to send the affidavit to the registrar to check the names on the petition or on the affidavit, and the time for the registrar to certify the names on the affidavit remain the same under the current and proposed charters. affidavit has been verified with the appropriate number of registered voters, the town clerk then has to deliver blanks of a recall petition to any of the voter listed on the affidavit. And that starts another clock. The petitioners then have to complete the recall petitions. Before, they were only given 20 days. Now they're given 28 days. And if they achieve that, they then provide the petitions to the town clerk. Originally, or under the current charter, they needed to acquire the signatures of 25% of the registered voters in town on the petitions in order for it to go forward. We're proposing to change that threshold down to 15% of registered voters, which for Ashland is somewhere in the 1650 range of registered voters. Again, the time durations for the town clerk to send it to the registrar and the registrar to certify the names, and if there are enough names, the time for the town clerk to submit the certification to the Board of Selectmen remain the same between the current charter and the proposed changes. After the Board of Selectmen receive the petition, they have 5 business days, either under the existing or the proposed changes, to notify the office holder that a valid recall petition has been certified. And then the office holder then has up to 5 business days to decide whether or not to resign or to contest the petition. If the office holder wishes to protest the petition and have a recall election, the Board of Selectmen needs to set an election date that is 90 days from the date that the town clerk certified the petition as having enough registered voters. And that 90 days is the same under the current and under the proposed. We did provide the current town charter also has a provision that if the next annual town election is to be held on, within 100 days from the clerk's certification, the Board of Selectmen can defer the recall election to the next annual town election. The threshold number of voters required for the recall to succeed is the same under the current and proposed at 2/3 of the voters participating in the recall election. And there's also a period under which if the office holder's term will end anyway within 180 days from the filing of the affidavit, there would be no recall election. If there is a recall election and it fails, a new recall election for the same official cannot be held sooner than an affidavit cannot be submitted to the clerk less than 180 days after the failed recall election. And we have also a period where if a office holder has been elected, you can't start a recall process for the first 180 days of that office holder's term. For the rationale, again, it was the community expressed an interest in making the recall process simpler, more achievable, or less onerous, and we took that into consideration, consulted with the call-in center, and looked at recall processes in the charters of other towns. and we're in the ranges of those other towns. I think I'm going into the next slide here.
Just a quick question, Ken, before you leave. So
Yep.
if my math is correct, the timeline, if nothing triggers the, an election within 100 days or so on, the process is essentially extended by 8 days? Is my math correct on that?
Oh, you mean,
So if everything fits into place, is
Yeah,
it just
we-
8
I did-
additional days that is added on to that?
Well, that was the reason for that column that I didn't really discuss that much on the sample timeline. So picking that particular date, I went through and, when it was business days, I counted business days and, took into account holidays that fell, and then when if it was calendar days, we counted calendar days.
Right.
So, but as you can see, if we had an October, how do we get back?
So it's
on that
essentially a
slide?
year is the time frame. Let's just round it off. It's essentially a year, and I don't think the time is not the, time frame's not the I guess the magic bullet here. It's more the other thresholds.
The recall election from, there's
Oh,
one other place.
there is an error in there.
There's an omission
Yeah,
in there.
I think we have 90 days. I think
We cut that to 65.
yeah, the slide is an error. The proposed days from setting a recall election is, instead of 90 in the current, it's dropped down to 65. Did we have 120 for the, I think it was 120 for the, if the annual election was held.
What if they're already on the ballot for the next election? What if they're already on the ballot for the next election?
That's saying 100, but that was.
So if I understand that correction, then you've reduced it by 25 days.
Yes.
That portion of it, but you've extended the ability to get signatures by 8, so you've really reduced it by 25 minus 8, correct?
Yeah.
So that's the time frame, really. So it's not significant time-wise. The significance, obviously, is the percentage of signature, number of signatures, and then percentage of voters. Okay.
Yes, and one of the rationales for reducing the time for the election was, how soon is it reasonable to hold an election? Because if we're having a recall, how long do we want this person to be in office if he's going to get recalled?
Right, okay. Good, thanks.
I have a question too, Mr. Rush. To your knowledge, have we ever had a recall election in Ashland?
I think one of the reasons we may not have is the onerousness of the current requirements. I'm trying to recall, I remember early on, I thought I had heard that one of the reasons that it was made onerous in an earlier charter was to practically make it impossible to have a recall. And the public input on was that public just wasn't interested in having it that onerous.
Did the Collins Center give the committee any information as to whether this is something that happens frequently in other towns or cities in Massachusetts? The recall process?
I think they did, but I can't recall what that might be.
I think East Long Meadow had such problems that rather than do a lot of recalls, they just rewrote the charter. And I think the closest this town ever came to a recall was resignation before the recall process got started. So I think it's purposely a challenging process because you just don't want to win, just get rid of something that people don't like. But the other side of it is the state would make it very challenging if you made it too easy. Collins Center gave us a lot of input, but it's a lot of math, and that's why we asked Ken to do it. Because he was good at it. But I don't think there's ever been a recall in town that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
If I may, just before Roberta continues, When we started this process, Ken didn't have a beard. Just want to let you know that. That too.
Thank you, Ken. Okay, so, under financial reporting, we had heard from the public and the Finance Committee itself and some of the town staff that they wanted to have consistent quarterly financial reporting that would be shared with the town government, school department, and the public, so that it was out there, very accessible, very easy to see, very easy to read and interpret, and didn't require that you were actually a school committee member or a board of selectmen to understand the difference between the two budgets, why they're different, and what's going on. We wanted to have some consistent reporting. So we're recommending that these reports be required, and these are some of the things that we thought that should be in the report, and we did get input from finance staff and others and the finance committee as well. So the report should include a description of the important features that are going to be discussed in the report, indication of major changes from the current fiscal year in financial policy, expenditures, and revenues, actuals for the current fiscal year, a report showing an estimate of revenues from all sources for the ensuing fiscal year, including the probable amount required to be levied and raised, a report including revenue, expenses, and general subsidies for any and all enterprise funds, revolving accounts for the school department, and such other material as the town manager, school superintendent, and finance committee may deem appropriate. The major thing here is that we were looking for transparency, information right out there, and for the school department to be reporting in the same way as the town side, with the same frequency. The public and the finance committee asked for this more transparency and consistency. Our hope and our expectation is the information is readily available and won't require additional work, and that the town manager, school superintendent, and finance committee can set additional parameters as they see fit, and that sharing the information with everyone, including the public, creates more transparency and mutual accountability. And doing it on a quarterly basis may even make town meeting easier. If people have had the opportunity to see it on a quarterly basis, and keep themselves educated and apprised of what's going on, then it may lead to deeper discussions, more informed discussions at town meeting. So the next section related to accountability and transparency is an entirely new Part 8 consisting of sections 8 through 1 and 8 through 5, which we're not going to see on the slides here. But essentially, it's a public appointment process that we're recommending that all appointing authorities adhere to. And we're asking that the appointing authority develop and publish its selection criteria so everyone knows how people are going to be selected, that it interviews and evaluates prospective candidates at an open meeting, and the candidates, if required by the appointing authority, submit an application and a resume, a cover letter and a resume, whatever. But we were really looking for a lot more beyond the existing talent bank forms, which are very uninformative, I think, and most people wind up attaching a resume, and you may even want, appointing authorities may even want more information from people. Having this appointment process provides for the record, and we're asking the appointing authorities to provide for the record at a public and open meeting the reasons for their selection and appointment of the successful candidates. And we're asking appointed multiple member bodies who have the vacancy and to whom the appointment is going to be sent, that they be able to make a recommendation and send it to the appointing authority, and that the appointing authority shall consider it. So that there's a little bit of two-way there, where if a committee has a vacancy and they have someone they would like to have be appointed who has applied, that they be able to make that recommendation to the appointing authority, and the appointing authority shall consider it. It doesn't mean they're going to choose that person automatically, but they should take a lot of consideration of the committee's recommendation. So just as we have a process for removing elected officials, we felt that there should be a process for removing appointed individuals for just cause. We outline what just cause is, and we are also recommending that the selectmen develop a code of conduct under section 9-9 so that the expectations for everyone are clear and that that code of conduct is approved by town meeting. We figured if people are going to have to live by that code of conduct, volunteer under that code of conduct, and abide by it, they should have the opportunity and the right to provide input and vote on it at town meeting. We discussed a lot whether there could be abuse in the removal process if someone is unpopular and the appointing authority just wants to get rid of them, or if the committee doesn't like somebody on their own committee and just wants to get rid of them. And we included in there, which again is no guarantee, no magic bullet, the same with the recall process. We included provisions that the person who is being considered for removal can request a public hearing, so that at least it can't be done behind closed doors and people have to be very forthright and in public about their reasons for wanting to remove somebody. And they have to declare what that just cause is and what the violations of the code of conduct might be. Sections under the appointment process provide explicit steps and a timeline for also filling vacancies, which include optional input, again, from the multiple member body with the vacancy. Any person we're adding these two provisions, any person holding appointed or elective office who's been convicted of a state or federal felony while holding office or having an appointment shall be deemed to have vacated the office. That's kind of an automatic out the door, just cause. Excessive absenteeism is defined as failing to attend 6 consecutive meetings instead of 4, as is currently stated in the charter. And part of the reason for that is we felt that committees were meeting much more frequently. And so we wanted to give a little bit more coverage for that and go to 6 meetings. So the rationale, I think I already talked about. And I just want to say that our feeling was that the process for appointments should be fair, transparent, public, professional, clearly articulated, and rigorous. And our feeling was that appointing volunteers to serve on a multiple member body is as important as selecting a paid employee and should be done with the same care and due diligence. Our last and shortest set of recommendations are the ones around clarity of process or language. And the first one is around the town manager. There had been some confusion during the year about what the town manager is allowed to engage in and whether serving on certain committees or boards or multiple member bodies was considered outside the scope of the position and whether it was allowed or not allowed. So we added the language in bold, including occupation or profession, hoping that that provided some additional clarity besides just saying other business. Does that make it clear for you, Mr. Herbert?
Makes it very clear.
Okay.
I'll quit that second job.
Okay. And we don't feel that it contradicts the provision under appointments, which is section 8-13C, which states that nothing in the appointment process means that you can't have a preferential appointment to a regional or state multiple member body like the Metro West Regional Collaborative or something like that, where an elected or appointed official or town employee has traditionally been appointed. Or if there's a new body that's being constituted, they would traditionally be appointed by virtue of their current position. So there are some instances where you want the town manager to serve on a regional multiple member body to represent Ashland, and that is considered appropriate and proper, not something outside the scope of the position.
That then also applies to selectmen, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
So we talked about that.
Okay, temporary absence, there's a clarification that we put into this section. If the town manager is temporarily unable to perform the responsibilities of the job, it currently reads that the Board of Selectmen may designate some other qualified person, and we just wanted to give that person a title. And we're recommending that that other qualified person be called the temporary town manager. And getting back to this for a second, we also added language that the temporary town manager can only, cannot do any permanent hires or permanent fires unless it's an emergency. The Human Resource Management System, which was section 6-2, we are recommending deleting because the objective has been completed. There's a Human Resource Director who's putting together a system, and there was no need to carry that forward into the next charter. This next section, I think, is the last one, and we're recommending that if the chair of any multiple member body, the Board of Selectmen or the school committee, if that position is vacant, or the chair is unable or unwilling to call a meeting, that the vice chair or two of the current members of the multiple member body may, with required notice, just proper open meeting law notice, call a meeting. The rationale behind this recommendation is that we wanted to prevent a committee's work from getting stalled due to a vacancy, the chair's incapacitation, or a disagreement among members about how to proceed. We are recommending this provision with the understanding that overriding the leadership of the chair is serious and should not be undertaken frivolously or for personal reasons. And that follows the unappointment process as well as the recall process. We're doing serious business here, and there's no room for personal issues to be getting in the way. We also wanted to create consistency across the Board of Selectmen, School Committee, and all multiple member bodies for who calls a meeting and who has the right and authority to call a meeting. And that is the end of the show.
Thank you.
Very nice work.
So, questions or discussion? And I want to invite my committee members to join in the discussion as well.
I'll open it up to the board. They've heard my complaints. They've heard, my concerns.
So just to review again the process moving forward. You've provided your report. Sounds like there's a couple tweaks that need to be done. There's a slide there. So but essentially you've completed your work. You've submitted it to the Board of Selectmen. I'm assuming that the clock starts now with the 60 days.
You got it.
Okay.
Tag, you're it.
All right. Thank you. So I guess...
Can I just follow up on your process question? So, Roberta and members of the committee, how do you, and I don't know if you were getting
Well,
at
I'm
this,
going to get
maybe
there,
you
so
were.
let me
Okay,
finish.
sure.
So,
Sorry.
so I guess from your perspective, and I know we're planning to have a public hearing, but from your perspective, and I would imagine if I was sitting in your seats, my expectation is that you would expect the Board of Selectmen to take this document and submit it to town meeting for consideration. And that's really where it should lie, as opposed to the five of us picking it apart, modifying it, or possibly rejecting it. So just wanted to get some feedback on that. Is that where you were going?
So I had a slightly different.
I have a question. Bill's.
Well, I guess it's part of that. I guess one thing I also want to know, do you folks see yourselves as continuing, so if we have a public hearing and people say certain things, do you see yourselves as still being involved, or do you want to basically hand this off to us, which I can understand if you do,
Okay.
but
We
would you see
haven't
yourselves as still
really-
meeting?
I thought that's where you were going, Steve,
Yeah.
actually. So we haven't really voted on this or made a decision about this, so I'll speak for myself personally, and because we're posted as a public meeting, our other committee members can also speak to it. Personally, just speaking for me, I would like to stay involved through the public hearing and through town meeting. Because I think if questions come up, this is the group that's best able to answer those questions. And I think we should be actively involved in that. I think that we did our best with the recommendations that we have to make, but if we really, like, you know, fell off the sidewalk on something, then I guess we can continue the debate, and certainly town meeting can continue the debate.
Were you asking, Steve, that this is, you either vote this up or you vote it down, and that there's no deliberation on each
Well,
item?
I certainly think, we should discuss it as a board. I'm not, but I guess, ultimately, personally, I don't think, it really should be the five of us that, necessarily debate this and then modify it or reject it or change it in any way. My opinion is it's really something that, the committee has worked 58 meetings in how many years?
2.
2 years.
And isn't that what our
exactly what you
public
did
hearing
with-
process is?
With the override? That went through the same process.
It
and then
did.
It came before the
It-
board
it-
and it was changed.
It did. I'm just giving you my opinion on this document here, and I wanted to actually soliciting the opinions of the committee.
If any other committee members want to make a comment, they should come up here so
Yeah,
that
so
people
that
at
the
home can
audience can
hear on
hear
the
you.
microphone.
While we're waiting for people to come up, as I see the process, is we have a public hearing. I mean, we should also, be diligent and read through this and make any notes and comments. But we are having a public hearing to get input from the public on this document, and we should take that information and deliberate. And then if there are changes based on that deliberation or questions based on that deliberation, I would feel very comfortable giving it back to the charter review to make any final tweaks or changes based on our debate as well as the public hearing.
If I may, Ken, before you have your chance to speak, it was my intention that once we received it, that the Charter Review Committee, along with the Board of Selectmen, when we had this public forum, would be together and we would sit jointly. And again, for the reason and the rationales that yourself, Yolanda, and Steve pointed out very nicely, is that the folks that worked on it, that would have the right answers, what should be there, without having to do, fact-finding on our own as to what the rationale was for this, and who else would be better to serve the forum properly would be that committee that worked on it for 2 years. And I know I'm trying to be as unbiased as I can with respect to being the chair here and being on this committee, but they've worked diligently on this, and it wasn't taken lightly. Everything was looked with a fine-tooth comb. And then Collins Center came in and did the same thing. They raked it over, and then we rehashed it, and we had great debate. I
Which I
would
think is
say great
evident
debate.
based on the final report
Right.
that we got.
I agree. But I think that, there's a whole lot of stuff here.
Oh, absolutely.
That needs to be digested and discussed.
yeah.
And I'm not suggesting this board digest it tonight. That's why, we don't do anything with set the policy making, especially with the constitution of our town. That's why we have 60 days to prepare for a public forum. And within that time frame, if we need to get together with the Charter Review Committee, then I would suggest that the next board that comes online and next year that follow suit and do what needs to be done.
Yep.
Ken, I'm sorry.
Okay. As I recall, there was some little discussion of what might happen after this point. And it was always my impression from the little discussion and my own expectations is that, the committee would be involved in the process up through the town meeting that decides, whatever gets sent off to the legislature. And again, my feeling was the committee, could be available to the Board of Selectmen to support them in the remainder of the process, even to the point of, sending back notes and, tweaking the final presentation to town meeting or the public meeting. So I don't plan on cutting and running. And I also have absolutely no illusions that it won't be a raucous town meeting either.
Well, that's a good beard too, Mr. Rush, by the way.
I agree with Ken. It's always been in the back of my mind that we've done all this work. We can't turn it over to you and let you defend our rationale. So in my case, I'd be willing to go ahead and work through the town meeting. Also, I just looked again. In actuality, after the 60 days, the Board of Selectmen have a decision to make. They can vote to put it on the warrant or not put it on the warrant. That's the thing. So.
Put this or put something.
Put something, put whatever comes out of the forum.
Okay.
And like we know, we picked up a couple issues tonight that we missed in reviewing it, so.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have another question, and it goes to, and I know the votes are in your public records and in your meeting notes. Can you speak to were all your votes unanimous? How did that?
Most of the votes were. There was, I think, a couple where someone might have abstained if they weren't there for most of the debate. I think there was one that you abstained, and I think there was the Board of Health vote was not unanimous.
Okay. Otherwise, the rest of the voting was
Well, most of them
unanimous.
were. Most of them, I recall.
There was a few other nays.
Yeah.
It was never 100%.
Okay.
Why are you all looking at me for?
Which is okay. I mean, that
Yeah.
means
Yeah,
you
no,
had good
that's-
debate and you had different ideas and.
If I may, I just don't want to go from a,
Yeah, we need you to.
I don't want to go from a.
Where do you live, first of all?
Where do I live? Here, there, and everywhere. I just don't want to go from a 2-year gestation period to a divorce. That's really, I think it's,
Good
it's,
analogy.
we want you to adopt it, but we're not going to give it up lightly. So, thank you.
All right.
And that's not taking anything from, from personal experience
No.
in any way, shape, or form.
I think, it's having served on a previous charter review, we did not create a document as substantial as this, as well done as this. So I commend all of you for 2 years and 58 meetings. So I would assume, and I'll defer to the chair, that our next step is some sort of either a retreat or a meeting to sit and discuss this.
And I would think that at the next meeting, that will be handed over to the new chair and vice chair. And I know that at some point there will be a retreat at some point at the end, sometime in June. And I would think that this would be one of the key topics to discuss.
And then we have to have our public hearing no later than July 31st.
July 31st.
July 1st, yes.
30 days from, 60 days from today.
Right.
KG Narayana, one of the members. I would like really thank the Board of Selectmen for putting me on the committee. And it's a real experience, and I'd like to continue with it. And I'll echo both Ken as Roberta's statements here. Thank you.
Good, thank you.
I was one of those who voted against the Board of Health. Not because I'm on the Board of Health.
So, I did have,
I'm surprised that you were able to vote on that issue, actually.
oh, I see.
Yeah.
No.
Well, we also vote by transparency here, don't we?
Yeah, that's
Well, it was, certainly, we went through the same processes, at least in terms of appointed versus elected on the committee I served on. And it was, that probably created the most discussion and debate in my committee. And, there, as you pointed out, Roberta, there's not one right way. There's not, flip a coin. There's pros and cons, and I think you laid it out very well. So I'm sure we'll have some interesting conversation.
Great, good job.
Thank you. Yeah, nice job. I did have 2 things I wanted to kind of clarify. I don't know if people want to take a lot of time now, but I noticed in the appointment process you gave us 30 days to appoint somebody after posting it for like 15 days, and We can talk about that some other time, but that struck me as a very challenging schedule, and the reason why it could become important is because if we don't appoint somebody, then the committee can then appoint somebody. So that's kind of a...
That's still in the charter now, though.
So, okay. So that struck me as kind of a challenging schedule, given the kind of logistics that happen. So I just
Well,
wanted to
depending
lay it
upon
out
the
there.
board too, or the committee that we're looking for the appointment to fill the vacancy. I mean, it may be a very important seat that needs to be filled, and you don't want that seat to be vacant any longer than necessary because...
Yeah, I understand.
But,
I'm
yeah.
just thinking, I noticed 45 days in another place, and I thought, geez, that's kind of more realistic, so...
Especially if you think about our summer schedule sometimes, where
Right.
we meet once in July and once in
Right.
August,
Yeah.
to try and do it in the 30
Okay.
days.
Mostly mimics the state legislation for the elected bodies being reappointed by committee. More or less mimics the same landscape.
Well, so, this type of discussion and feedback is exactly what
We're looking
we
for.
were expecting, that could be your contribution, and
Right.
Okay.
send the notes back to us.
Right. I mean, we have the emails and stuff, we can do it that way. or
Sounds
if you-
good. Notes and
You know,
emails.
one point person, whatever. Kathy, I know you want to make a comment, or come on up.
I have
yeah.
one more question.
Sure.
I actually had three. The first one, which is there's a ton of work in this, so I'm really impressed. I'm hoping the PowerPoint and the report are available online or pretty soon. Awesome. And then the last question, which is sort of a clarification, is what constitutes an official committee or an official board versus an unofficial committee or board? Because I would hate to lose some of the important board members that we have on quote-unquote unofficial committees because they provide lots of valuable input.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And my question actually goes, I think piggybacks with that, because I think we need to have some clarity as to, what is a subcommittee? So is a subcommittee, and I'm going to use the Upper Charles Trail Committee, is that a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen? Is that, how do we define that? And,
We didn't specifically, I mean, we talked about multiple member bodies as boards, commissions, committees, subcommittees. It would include ad hoc committees that, had a job and were
Right.
gonna dissolve after a certain period of time.
right,
But I think that, I think that any constituted group of two or more people was defined as a multiple member body, and would be sort of the official committee.
okay. But I guess, just something that I think we should all think about is just some clarity regarding that, because if the Board of Selectmen create a committee that in essence is going to report back to us, is that the definition of a subcommittee?
I
So
don't.
I don't know.
Personally, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think a
Something we can
subcommittee
ask
is
counsel on.
mostly if
Definitely.
among the five of you.
So a subcommittee would
A couple
be,
of you need to get together and you might add one or two other people.
Okay.
But these committees where you seek townwide membership, those are not subcommittees. And you only have,
okay.
in
Well,
the case of the Upper Charles Trail, one board member on it. That's not a subcommittee, that's a separate committee you have appointed.
okay.
And it's accountable to you
And
because you
according
appointed
to
them.
what you're saying, that would not be allowable, right? Based on based on the
Correct.
changes that
Yeah.
you're recommending,
Correct.
us having, we created the Upper Charles Trail Committee, a selectman being on that would not be allowable.
Ex officio only, non-voting.
So ex
Correct.
officio, okay, so if it's a non-voting, okay.
Yeah, okay.
Because I can think about a couple, we have the Pond Street Working Group, again, not an official committee, but I go to the meetings. I know we're about to have to create a Complete Streets Committee to move forward our Complete Streets policy. Again, I would think there might be one of us on that to help move it forward. The Downtown Committee that, now that we've looked at the RFPs and have selected that. So those are, I think, things that we're gonna have to talk through
If I may,
and determine.
if you create it, you can uncreate it, but if you create it and you're using citizens as members, your only role can be ex officio.
Okay.
In the rationale for allowing that was, to allow the experience and facilitate the communication that you would have now.
Okay. so ex
All
officio,
right.
okay,
As
that
a
makes sense.
liaison, per se.
Okay.
I want to wrap this up.
Yep.
I have some personal comments I would like to say, if you don't mind. Everybody had the opportunity to speak. I have worked with this board for 2 years, and I've seen the progression of this committee work feverishly in trying to get this done. It was like the Waltons. It wasn't always the best. We had some hearty discussion and lively discussion, and I would say we had lively debate. But all in all, I think the goal of everybody that was on this committee was to better the community and to better the Constitution of Ashland, and that make it easier, like Roberta said, for the current residents and for future residents. And I just want to tell you, it was an honor to work with all of you. And we're not done yet. We have a long way to go. We should still have a long way to go. And be part of that process. And however the town decides to vote on it when it comes time for either a special town meeting or a fall town meeting. And I would strongly suggest that because of the nature and the importance of this topic alone, I think we have a separate town meeting for this, and not add it to a fall town meeting. I think it needs its own entity for a meeting. So that would be my suggestion. I knew I was not going to get the last word. I knew this.
Which one of the Waltons was this?
No, I wanted to say something about the Board of Health vote. I watched the Board of Selectmen meeting where you had all the volunteers come in here, and I was extremely impressed with most of them. And thought that would be really great. And then when I watched who was running for re-election, and there were 2 spots open, and only one person was running. And then I actually, at that point, had not quite made up my mind whether to go elected or appointed, and I went from elected to appointed because I would have rather seen those people.
Yeah, I'm going to respond to Alexis here just because elections are part of our DNA. It's part of our, it's just the way we're wired in our democracy. But, I felt exactly the same way, and no offense to any Board of Health members that might be in the room, but if the quality of the people that came to be appointed, if we could have replaced the entire Board of Health with the people that were in this room, I think we would have improved the situation. Now, that's one thing. The second thing that kind of really I found extremely, I would say, distasteful in this year's election has nothing to do with the unopposed elections. Those happen. It's unfortunate. I think we need to do a better job of encouraging people to step up. But it was the whole write-in process that occurred specifically with the Board of Health this year, and specifically with one candidate that the day before, in essence, created a sign and decided to run for the Board of Health. I think that's an issue with certainly certain environments. So that was, for me, another consideration. I haven't made my mind yet, but those are 2 big considerations.
But I just want to let you know that there was a lot of give and take and a lot of thought involved in that, and we went back
No doubt.
and forth.
No doubt.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen of the Charter Review Committee, thank you very much for the presentation. It was professionally and wonderfully done. I want to thank the chair and the vice chair. You've taken us in and you've corralled us in very nicely, because I know our ego sometimes got in the way. Even though there was a sign on the door, leave your egos outside.
Sure.
But it all worked out, and I think the report that was turned in by this committee, I think it'll help the town down the road very much. So again, thank you all very much.
Yes, thank you.
Well, I don't know how much it was, but I appreciate that. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Unfortunately, that didn't translate him being there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So appreciate that. Thank you very much, and we'll let you know what we have to do, and we'll probably call for another meeting together, joint meeting, when we have a better time. But it'd probably be after sometime the end of June, maybe early July, maybe after that. Well, we'll have our retreat, I think, first to go over this, or do you want to go over it sooner? Give you guys time to digest it. I mean, I've digested it for 2 years, so it's up to.
It made for great reading on Monday, on that rainy,
In that
dreary
rainy,
Monday
rainy
afternoon.
Monday, sure did.
I move that the Charter Review Committee adjourn.
There a second?
This would be the
Aye.
earliest meeting ever.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you very much, folks. We appreciate all your time, and Betsy, thank you for taking all those wonderful notes.
8:45 adjournment for you guys.
Good job.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Nicely done.
Yeah.
We have a consent agenda, and in your packet, you'll see the amended financing consents with Amoresco, and that has to do with the high school and the middle school. And we have some signatures, a signature page that needs to be signed as well.
Yep.
Good.
As a result of that.
I move that we approve the consent agenda as
I'd like
presented.
to discuss the Amoresco.
So you're looking to pull it.
So
I'm
you're
gonna
looking to
pull
pull
it,
it
yes.
out
So
of
make,
the,
Pull it out.
your,
I'd like to pull it.
make a motion to pull it
Oh
from
my
the
God, you mean
consent
if I don't
agenda.
get, I'd make a motion to pull the Amoresco
okay.
agreement from the consent
Thank you for
agenda.
clarifying that.
okay. So I move that
Second.
we accept
Hold
the
on, we
consent.
gotta-
oh, okay, sorry.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Those opposed? Hearing none, 5-0.
Okay, and I move that we approve the consent agenda as it remains.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Seeing none or hearing none, 5-0. Consent agenda is approved. Okay, Mr. Shear.
There on the gun.
Yes. So I'd just like I started wading through that 11 pages of legalese and the lease and the lesser and the party and the whatever, so.
How far
could
did you
you
get?
just about 4.5 pages. So could you just summarize, at least for us and the public, what we're doing here, and the town council has reviewed it, and this is something we should be doing.
Okay, so this is actually the second time you've signed an amendment to consent agreements. And all it is essentially is, so when Amoresco put those systems in place at the high school and the middle school, they financed it. And so that's being used as collateral. And so similar to when, I guess, a mortgage is sold to a different bank, their financing agreements have switched over to a new company. So
new
this is
company.
just assigning that collateral.
So no really change in what we're doing, and just moving forward to, okay.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
Does that
Yes.
make it easier for you?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I move that we approve the amended finance consent with Amoresco as presented.
All
Second.
those, second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, vote is 5-0. Thank you. Okay, moving down to old and new business. I know that Yolanda had brought it up at our last meeting, the farmer's market town tent, and you have dates that are available for us. And
Yeah, there are many dates available.
Yep.
I thought I had emailed that and thought it was in the packet, but I realized not. So, I would like to recommend, the school committee is currently doing the opening market on the 10th. And I know many of us plan on being there anyway, so you do have it. Oh, good.
we do.
Okay.
That's opening day, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the very last end, I think.
Okay, I don't see it in mine, but that's okay.
It's like the last page, I think.
Yeah.
The very last page.
Okay, oh, is it on the back?
It may be on the benefits.
There you go. Okay, sorry.
Okay.
So, we could do that, but I'd also like to pick either one or two other dates. There's also other committees that have not responded, so if you are part of those other committees and could get them to give me dates, because I think we have found that when committees come to the town tent, they always have questions asked, and people really appreciate it. And I always hear back from the committees that have been there that they appreciate having been there. So there's many committees that some of us are sitting on that are not on here that I still need to get feedback from. So if you could look at that. But so I'd like to recommend we do opening day and then pick one other date. When is it?
I said opening day is fine.
Okay.
Mm-hmm, it works for me.
Are these microphones on, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah.
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 They don't forget, they don't amplify.
They don't
They just,
amplify out
Right.
here.
Just,
well, Tomato Day sounds rather intriguing.
August 26th.
Okay, I'm not sitting in the booth with you. with the tomato.
Are you suggesting
Well,
that
remember,
something
we
may go
can
flying
split,
through the
we
air?
can split the
Also
day, right?
split,
So
yeah.
two of us can do a morning shift. It's 9 to 1, so
What
9
day-
to
I'm
11
sorry,
and
what-
11 to 1.
what
We're
day
looking
is
at
tonight?
August 26th.
So
I would
just so
just-
you know, Joe, they're heirloom tomatoes. They're not just ordinary
I
tomatoes.
understand
No
that.
throwing 'em.
And no, salt and pepper, that's it.
No little mozzarella and some balsamic?
You could do that.
All right.
Oh, I won't be
I'm
around
getting
that
hungry.
day.
I
Yeah, I was
haven't
thinking
had
more
supper
like
yet.
rotten ones.
I was gonna say, the 26th doesn't look good for me, and
Okay.
Rob just said the same.
All right.
The 19th of August, we could be there with CPC, or, nope,
Yeah, I'm available the 19th.
Is the 12th of August nothing day, or?
there was nothing on the calendar.
Are they having it that day?
Oh, yeah, they're having it, there was just no
Oh, there's no
special,
special
there was
event.
no event day as
Okay.
of when I had
No
this
event day.
information. But it is the day of the Dragonfly Festival.
Oh, that's
So
right.
I don't know
So,
that-
yeah, so a
I know
lot of
some
the
of us are working
volunteers will
on
be
that.
working over there.
Yeah.
Yep. That's right, I forgot about that, you're right.
Possibility is the 29th, the 100th Farmers Market Day,
29th of,
July.
Everybody around?
I know I'm gonna be there,
Tuesday?
so
So I'm in, wait a minute.
it's never a Tuesday, Rob, it's always a Saturday.
Sorry, I'm in the wrong month.
Sorry.
All right, there it is, yes.
Oh, my.
I'm right around.
Need a ride home tonight too, by the way?
We may not
I
get a
can
lot
give you a
done, but
ride
we
if
do
you
laugh
need
a
it.
lot. I just want to let you know that, okay?
So
Oh,
either
yeah,
the
that's-
29th, is
That sounds good.
Yeah.
July 29th good?
Good, just so everybody knows what we're doing up here, the farmer's market is, our 6th season is starting on June the 10th, Saturday, June the 10th, 9 a.m. through 1 p.m. This is our 6th season, and we're actually celebrating our 100th market day on July the 29th. So there's all sorts of theme days that we schedule and plan, and we anticipate, opening day is always our single biggest day, so we have a full layout, should be a lot of fun.
I thought you had no board reports tonight.
And part of what we're deciding is there's a town tent where all the committees in town have been invited to come and spend a day at the market to share what they are doing and to either recruit volunteers or just talk about what they're doing to the community. Okay, so we now have 2 dates. Thank
The
you.
2 dates, we're good?
Yep.
What's the second?
The July 29th.
July 29th. That's that Tuesday.
Tuesday, July 29th.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
2022.
I'll report to you how it works.
Okay, very good. Anything to report on the town manager side? Any board reports?
Silence.
Anything? Nothing? I have a few things. And I'll be real quick about it.
Board reports are not on the agenda tonight.
But the chairman can decide whatever he wants to do.
All right.
So sit there and be quiet like a good boy. Okay. High school graduation, Sunday.
Are you going?
Yes,
Would you
I
be
just
willing to
need-
give the scholarships?
sure.
Because I thought I was going to go, but I can't.
You can't make
I
it.
cannot make it, unfortunately.
Okay,
I let them know that already.
all right. Is anybody else attending?
I may attend, it depends if we are visiting our new granddaughter, guess who's gonna get that preference?
No, absolutely, I understand completely.
Depends.
Is Vice Chair around? You can't make it either. Okay, all right, I'd be happy to do it. And I just want to report that our first summer concert will be June 27th, and I'll just keep reminding everybody. And Rhythm and Blues Band, Jazz Band, Bobby Watson Band, be the first one of the year.
Great.
So if you know
Be
that
there.
band, definitely make it. They're awesome. They're a signature group around here, so. Other than that, I appreciate all the effort tonight. Thank you for attending a third meeting during the month of May. but I think we got a lot done, and timely as well. So do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none, good night, God bless, and we'll see you at June 7th meeting. Good night.